Mark is from South Australia from memory, and he has written an absolutely fantastic book. I encourage you to actually go and get the book. It's Creatures of Habit. I got this book last year, and it really is a simple book to read, and it is full of some amazing information, and it really delves a little bit into the psyche of clubs and people and all that sort of stuff. So I think we're pretty privileged to have Mark come along to our district assembly and just share some insights on membership and what a precious resource our members really are and what Rotary does. So, Mark, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark. I'm just going to share my screen because I've got a presentation to do. So I'm hoping it's going to just all work like clockwork. And push this button. Are we good? Has everyone got that screen up? We're all good? Okay. I'm just going to push another button here. Won't be a moment. I'm just going to get me what I can see and what I can't see. Okay, we're good. I mentioned that I wanted to talk about our most precious resource today. And when I ask the question, what is our most precious resource, the most common response I get is our members. And I sort of think the answer is close to that, but not quite. I actually think our most precious resource is time. Because it doesn't matter who you are, what stage of life you're in, you never know how much more time you're going to have. And it doesn't matter whether you spend the day on the couch or whether you spend the day out in the community doing stuff, you're not going to get that day back. So today's presentation is about the way we use, and I think as Rotarians sometimes abuse, that most precious resource of ours, which is time. So here we go. What, of course, is the number one reason given for people not wanting to join Rotary? Well, I find the most number one reason that I hear is I just don't have the time. So that's why today I'm going to be narrowing in on that topic of time and how we use it. A little bit of history. I joined Rotary back in 1997 after 10 years in Rotaract. At the time I joined Rotary, there were 39,846 members in Australia. Fast forward to 2020, and the number has changed a little bit downwards since then, 26,695 when I prepared this presentation a few months ago. So we've actually lost a third of our membership base in just over 22 years, and I don't think there's any other way of describing that as a crisis, and we need to address it drastically. I'm sure many of you have seen these age demographic pie charts, which show a very uneven distribution of age categories across the organisation. 50% of the general population is aged under 50, but in Rotary membership, it's only 12% of our membership base which is aged under 50. So I constantly get asked the question, how can we get a broader cross-section of our community? How can we get younger people involved? What is it that's keeping them away? What is it that's making Rotary not so attractive to that demographic? So as someone who has a lot of conversations in the membership realm, I get asked, where are we going to find these members? Where are they coming from? How do we get hold of them and attract them to Rotary? I want to just flip the question around a little bit. And when we think of people we'd like to attract into our organisation, not so much ask where are they and how do we get hold of them, but this question: how much spare time will they likely have? So I'm going to show you a few slides here of various different demographics of people that we would love to get into Rotary. And I'm going to ask the question of all of them, how much spare time do you think they've got? The first photo, university students. So how much spare time do you reckon university students have got? They're studying full-time, possibly got a part-time job, sporting commitments, family commitments, other hobbies and interests. I think you'll all agree they're not going to have a lot of spare time on their hands. Let's have a look at the next group. Those are young people starting out in their career path. They're working hard to impress the boss, maybe putting in extra hours to get the overtime and work their way up the ladder. Likewise, they will probably have sporting commitments or other interests and family commitments. They're not going to have a lot of spare time either. The next group is small business owners or managers, and I'm in this group. How much spare time do you reckon they've got? First one's there opening up in the morning, and often the last one's there locking up at night, and they're up till midnight doing BAS and payroll and all that fun stuff. They haven't got a lot of spare time either. Now, the next group, the young families. We do have this rhetoric of Rotary being a family-friendly organisation, and I absolutely know that some clubs do this really well, but I think some clubs need to work on their family-friendliness a little bit more. But my kids are both teenagers now. I'm past the stage of nappies, but I'm sure those of your parents remember what it was like. It's a challenging time with young ones in the house and not getting as much sleep as you'd like, and that trip to the supermarket that used to take 5 minutes, now you've got to load up the prams and half the car to go and get a bag of sugar. We don't have a lot of spare time as young parents and juggling work commitments. The next group I want to look at is what was once the domain of Rotary, the corporate executives, the high flyers, the movers and shakers. These guys are working longer hours and flying all over the place. Well, they haven't probably the last 3 months, to be fair. But again, another group of people we would love to get into the organisation, but typically don't have a lot of spare time on their hands. Now, everything's going to change when I show you this next slide, because now I want to talk about the retirees. And all of a sudden, we've got a group that has a lot more flexibility with how they use their spare time. Granted, I understand a lot of them devote a lot of time to their family and looking after grandkids. And they've earned the right to sort of fly north for the winter and have their extended holidays. Good luck to them. But as a demographic, as a segment of our membership, I think you'll all agree that when it comes to spare time, the retirees are the ones that have more time to give. And I believe the number one reason our organisation is dominated by retirees is quite simple. They're the ones with the time. And if we want to get a broader representation of people, particularly younger people, into the organisation, I think we must look at what we're offering from a perspective of how we use the time of our volunteers. And I want to use an analogy. It's not one that I thought up, but it's one that I use quite a lot. And that is of one of my favourite sports, and that's Test cricket. And notice I put the word Test before cricket. I'm a traditionalist when it comes to cricket. I can sit down and watch 5 days of cricket without any trouble whatsoever. And I just love the longer version of the game. But probably 30, 40 years ago, cricket administrators worldwide recognised that the fan base was shifting. They weren't able to attract a wider audience, and they couldn't compete with other sports such as football, rugby, basketball, tennis, baseball, where a game's over in 3 or 4 hours. And over the last 30 or 40 years, you've seen various forms of the game change. We've got limited overs cricket, we've got 2020 cricket, which is a big deal these days. And of course, the women's game has really improved over recent years with greater exposure. And there are so many more people now engaged in the game of cricket than was once the case when Test cricket and first class cricket was the only offering. Now, me personally, I still love the Test game. Likewise, there's a lot of Rotarians out there that still love traditional Rotary, but we need to be able to offer different versions of Rotary that are going to suit people that are more time poor. So I want to ask a few questions about the way we use our time in Rotary, and I want you all to have a bit of a think about the total time you commit to Rotary in an average year. And I'll stress that this year is not an average year. So prior to, say, February, have a think of this question: how much time do you think you all committed to Rotary in a year? And if you can draw a little bit of paper in front of you, just draw a big circle, because we're going to do another pie chart. And I actually think I know the equation already you're going to use to work out how much time you commit to Rotary in a year. I might touch on that later. But once you've worked that out, I'm going to ask you another question. What portion of that total time that you commit to Rotary in a year do you think you use for meetings or getting to and from meetings? Now, this is something I researched quite extensively in the process of putting my book together. And this may come as a surprise to some, maybe not to some others, but I found that the average Rotarian uses approximately 60 to 75% of the total time they commit to Rotary across a year in either being at or getting to and from meetings. And the problem with that is that every other aspect of Rotary life, the projects, the fundraisers, the social events, training events such as what we're participating in today, has to be squeezed into that last sort of 25 to 40%. Now, I don't know about you, but I think this is a problem. I think this is a big imbalance. I think it's way out of kilter, and I think there's something we need to do about it. And I would suggest for many of you, you've probably never seen it or thought about it or seen it represented this way before. I think this is a problem that we need to deal with. I'm going to throw some other questions at you, which as club leaders to be coming into a new Rotary year, you probably all want to consider some of these things about how your meetings operate. And these are all questions you've probably heard before, and they're quite reasonable questions to ask, such as, are our meetings interesting? Are they welcoming? Are they punctual? Are they professionally run? Are our meetings informative, with informative and entertaining guest speakers? Do they represent good value for our members? And here's another one. Is the food and service good at our meeting venue? These are completely legitimate questions to ask about our meetings. And I would like to think that most of you can probably tick most of those boxes, or hopefully are working towards ticking most of those responses and saying yes. However, I'm going to now ask you another question, which we never ask about our Rotary meetings, but I actually think it's the most important one we need to be asking. And here it is. Those of you who've got a pen in front of you might want to write this down, because I think this is the most important question I'm going to ask today. Are our meetings a productive and effective use of our volunteers' time? Just have a little moment to think about that, because when I'm in front of a live audience in some venue, as soon as I ask that question, I get a lot of faces looking back at me that look a bit like this, suggesting, you know what, I've never really thought about that. And that's maybe something we need to start thinking about. Because as I showed you before with some of the slides, busy people don't have a lot of time to give. So the time they give must be effective and productive. It's really, really important. Here's something else that I asked in the process of researching my book, and I did a comprehensive survey. I asked the question, what is it that we want from our meetings? And I got many, many responses, which I sort of consolidated into single word answers, because they all meant roughly the same thing. And here are the top 2 responses I got when asking that question of Rotarians. What is it that we want from our meetings? Number 1, they wanted entertainment. They wanted to be able to go to a meeting and have a good fun night, have an entertaining speaker and a bit of fun from the sergeant or raffle or whatever it is. They wanted to have a good time. Number two thing they wanted from meetings is camaraderie. They love the weekly catch up with their friends, talking about what they're up to, what happened in their week, how the sporting team went, what their grandkids are up to. And I, for the record, think these 2 things are really, really important. So I'm not going to diss them. And for the record, I think most clubs probably tick both those boxes and fulfill a sort of element of entertainment and camaraderie for their members. But I started thinking, you know, there's something missing from all this that's not showing up in the results. And then it struck me that given that 88% of our membership base are aged over 50, these 2 responses were being very heavily swayed by that 88% of people responding who were over 50. And I thought, well, the younger voice isn't really getting much of a show here. So what I decided I'd do is look a little bit closer at some of the responses and only look at responses from people under 50. And you may be very surprised to hear what under 50s are looking for from meetings, because it's very different from what the over 50s are looking for. Here's what I found. The number 1 thing that under 50s is looking for from meetings is productivity. They want to be able to achieve something at a meeting. And I've often made the mistake in the past of just assuming that younger people weren't interested in meetings. And whilst I'm sure there are some that aren't, what I found when I looked a little bit harder was that they're prepared to come to a meeting, but they want to actually achieve something. If your meeting is about analysing, discussing, and finding solutions to the problems in society, people who are falling through gaps, if your meeting is about planning some project or fundraiser and you're actually achieving something, they feel like they're playing a part and they feel like that's productive, and they don't see that as a waste of time. They see that as a good reason to be there. The number 2 thing that the younger people are looking for from a meeting is networking. They want to be able to advance themselves in the workplace and in society and meet people who can help them. And Rotary calls itself a network. It's one of the world's oldest and widespread networks. However, again, because of our age profile, we have a very large percentage of retirees in our clubs. And once people retire, they do lose some of those natural networks. Some of them begin to atrophy. So for a younger person coming into an older club, they may not see the networking opportunities that they had perhaps hoped for. So when I then asked the question, well, how are clubs going with these two factors, and I was able to tick the top two, I've got to sort of put a question mark against these, because there are probably clubs out there that are doing really well in this perspective, but I think there are clubs that really could pick up their game and offer more from a perspective of productivity, i.e. achieving something at meetings and networking. Okay, I often wonder how we've managed to put meetings at the centre of our Rotary universe. I believe that we seem to venerate the meeting as the epitome of Rotary life at times, and everything else we do in Rotary seems to have to revolve around the meeting. And that's not the model I would really like to see. What I'd like to see meetings replaced with is service. I'd really like to see service at the centre of the Rotary universe, with everything else, including meetings, revolving around service, rather than having meetings at the centre of the Rotary universe. And something I've found really interesting in these COVID-19 times is that it didn't take long for Rotary clubs to be able to latch onto the technology and start meeting online. And look, I think that's a good thing. I think it's great that we're still able to keep in touch with each other. But I've also found it interesting that we're a very meeting-centric organisation, and we've found a new way to meet. But have we found new ways to serve? Have we found new ways to get out in the community and be active and make an impact in our community? And I think the jury is out on that one at this stage. I want to share a quote with you from one of the world's great entrepreneurs. And I don't know, a few years ago, he released his top 6 requirements of all of his businesses. And the number 1 on that list was, unless there's a specific purpose for a meeting, don't have one. And yet I reflect on the way we do things in Rotary, and we seem to have a history of just having meetings whether there's a purpose for them or not. And I just think this is a really important question to ask as we emerge from COVID-19 and look at new models and new ways of doing things. Are there actually genuine purposes beyond the entertainment and camaraderie of our meetings? And are we following our motto of service above self? I just want to finish up with a bit of a story about my own club, the Rotary Club of Seaford, which I started a few years ago. We've got our number 1 motto is less meeting, more doing. And at the Rotary Club of Seaford, we place an extremely high priority on hands-on volunteering opportunities. We're constantly looking for ways to keep our members active and give our club a high level of community exposure. And the secret to engaging our members in so many projects comes down to our flexible meeting program, which frees up more times for members to contribute in more meaningful ways. We only meet twice a month. Our first meeting is on the first Thursday night of the month. Our second meeting usually falls on the 3rd Sunday afternoon of each month. But that Sunday meeting can be combined with or substituted for a service project. And as it turns out, right at this very time, being the 3rd Sunday of the month, my club is participating in a service project right now. They're doing a gardening project, and I'm not there because I'm speaking to you guys, which I'm happy to do. But as soon as I finish here, I'm going to be whizzing down and helping out with that project. And I've just stopped it at this example because how often do you see at a Rotary hands-on project 3 generations working on the same project? It's one of my favourite ever photos from the projects that we do. Here's another example of a community garden we do a bit of work in. I'm going to show you a few more images. At the time, the gentleman on the left was 73. He was the oldest member of our club. The young lad on the right was my son, Aaron. This was about 3 years old. He was 13 at the time. So having 2 people working alongside each other on a Rotary project with 60 years between them. I love that photo. A few more photos I want to show you of this gardening project, and good reason for it, because we've involved a lot of people in this that aren't Rotarians. We paved the path through this garden. We sold those fundraising pavers that businesses or individuals pay 40 or 50 bucks each, and the whole project was cost neutral. But here's what I want to show you this photo. Why I want to show you this photo. This gentleman here, partner of a Rotarian. The young lady here is a daughter of a Rotarian. Now it's a bit hard to see in this photo, but the young lad at the back on the cement mixer is the son of a Rotarian. Next photo. We have the wife of a Rotarian. We also have the next door neighbour of a Rotarian. A lot of non-Rotarians joining in our projects. And I want to tell you a story about this young lady here. When I say young, she's my age. We knew each other as teenagers. We both went all the way through Rotaract together. At the end of my 10 years in Rotaract, I joined my sponsoring Rotary Club, which was the Rotary Club of Edwardstown. I was a member of that club for 19 years before starting the Rotary Club of Seaford. That whole time, for 19 years, on and off, I tried to get this lady, Sandra, to join Rotary. She understood the Rotary value proposition. She was used to what Rotary did, because as Rotary actors, we had a lot of involvement with our sponsoring club. My former club even sponsored her daughter to National Youth Science Forum. So she did have that want to give back to Rotary, and she really appreciated what Rotary did. But every time I asked her, the same response: I just don't have time. She's a very busy career woman, and she just didn't have time. And I asked her on and off for about 19 years to join my former Rotary club. The moment I started a new Rotary club and I said, hey, Sandy, I'm starting a new Rotary club. We're not going to be based around meetings. We're going to be based around service. We're going to be meeting only twice a month. They're going to be very casual, informal meetings. We're going to be doing a lot of hands-on projects. She said, where do I sign up? I'm telling you guys, there are hundreds, potentially thousands of people right in your community that are going to be great for Rotary. They would be willing to do what the sorts of projects we do, and they could get something out of Rotary and give something back. But we've got to be able to offer the right version of Rotary, and I feel in many cases we're not. So for those of you from a membership perspective who are casting your lines out, trying to hook new people into this organisation, I want you to consider where you're casting your lines, and are they biting? And maybe it's the bait. Maybe it's the bait on the hook. And if the bait on the hook is little more than meetings, I don't think a lot of them are going to bite. You really need to be able to offer something beyond that. We get a lot of people coming onto these projects and engaging that aren't members that we wouldn't be able to attract along to meetings, but we can get them along to projects. And like I mentioned, we sometimes swap projects and we swap meetings and we do a project and a meeting at the same time. I'm going to wind up now with one slide, and this is the greatest piece of advice I can give to a incoming leader of a Rotary club from someone who's been training leaders of Rotary clubs for many years. And that is about the process of change. I've been a change maker. I've been trying to get Rotarians to change for as long as I can remember. And the number one reason change doesn't happen in Rotary clubs is because leaders have this paralysing fear. If we're going to change, we're going to lose members. And I'll admit that it is true, over the years we have lost members who have felt the pace of change has been way too fast. But I can guarantee you, we have lost many, many more members who have felt the pace of change has been too slow. Many, many more. And that doesn't even take into account the amount of members that we've never got in the first place. They've never joined because we haven't been able to keep up with the times, and we haven't been able to keep the pace of change fast enough. So please put that one in your kit bag. And if you're trying to implement change in your Rotary club this coming year, and someone's saying, we can't change too fast, the members aren't going to like it, just remember that we lose far more members because we're not changing fast enough. I'm going to leave it at that, and I wish you all the very best for your years ahead, and thanks for your time today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mark. That is absolutely brilliant. And a lot of what Mark was touching on is what we touched on in the new strategic plan. We need to do things differently. We need to be more flexible, and we need different models of how we have our clubs. His book, Creatures of Habit, let me assure you, he's only scratched the surface, and looking at the chat, he's certainly challenging a lot of our thinking. And that's exactly what it's all about. If people are interested and want to know more about how to get this book, shoot me a message and I'll get in contact with Mark and make it available. From memory, it's about $25 or something like that, Mark?
It's $24.90. Thank you very much, Mark. By the way, Tim Moore's got a few copies sitting around his office too.
Oh, well, there you go. Don't harass me, harass past district governor Tim.
You can harass me, by the way.
All right. So thank you very much, Mark, for being involved.